everyone. And I'd like to welcome. I'd also like to welcome anyone who's watching on the internet. You're very welcome, and we're very pleased that you're here. So let's go through the formalities. Apologies for absence, Wendy.
I've got Councillors Collins, Mitchell and Sidhu.
Okay. And that. Okay. And, oh, right. They're here. Good. Okay, I've just creeped in. Okay, declarations of interest. Okay, so declarations of interest, the first part of that, I'm sure, is an email from Mari Rabuns about the Chiswick Business Park, which I'm sure everyone received. Okay. And apart from that, I've not had any direct communications. And Councillor Tony Lukey?
I did. Maybe other councillors did receive stuff from the architects for the Bethany Way item. I know it was a little while back. I was wondering where that came from and why, but it showed. Having looked at the agenda, it refers to that.
Right. Okay. Well, that I don't recall that, so that's going to be interesting. I don't know. If
I'll read my emails.
I hope you're not implying that I don't. Right.
Did I say, Councillor Smart, you don't read your emails?
We apparently have now. So anyway, do you think we could concentrate on what we should be doing, Tony? Thank you, please, because I'd rather get on with the meeting rather than bantering about. Thank you. Okay. Anybody else? Oh, other declarations of interest. Okay, that's fine. Thank you. So turning to the minutes of the meeting held on the 5th of August, for those of you who are here, pages 6 to 8. I'll take any matters of inaccuracy first, please. Everybody's happy with those minutes? Good. I hope that was the case. Any matters arising from those? No. Good. Okay, so I can now sign those as a true record. Thank you very much indeed. Excellent. Okay. I was going to move the agenda around, but whilst I know that Councillor Biddulph is in the building, the objector has not arrived yet, and he was about to... Oh, they're here. Excellent. Right. Right, Joe. Good evening, Councillor Biddulph. You're actually going to be on first, but so we're going to take your agenda item first, but we're going to start with the officer's report, and then at that point, once the officer's done the report, I'll be inviting, is it Peter Newman? Thank you very much, to speak, and then followed by Councillor Biddulph, who called this item in. And then we'll have the applicant speaking after that. Okay, so over to Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, this is the application for 164 Duke Road. It's an application for a roof extension with additional openings and solar panels on top of the building. The property is a 2-storey detached dwelling at the west side of Duke Road. To the south, sorry, you've got a site plan in front of you. To the site is 1 and 2 Devonshire Passage. And then beyond that, to the South St Mary's School. The road is a cul-de-sac, and the access outside the site is to the vehicular and pedestrian access to the school. The wider, if we just flick through some of these site photos, that's the application site itself. And it's the white building that we're looking at today. The housing to the north is of the type you can see in the property, that glebe character. That this is the rear of the site. And from Devonshire Passage, this is 1 and 2 Devonshire Passage, you can see in these images, and the application site moving forward. And these are the application drawings. So you see the mansard roof extension on top of the building, and if you might, depending on where you can see the green outline of those on those plans, thanks, identifying the changes in the openings on the side of the property. So there is, you will have noticed in the report, some planning history for this site, which I just wanted to highlight. Key to this case, sorry, is the previous roof extension, which was approved of the same dimensions in 2015. And again, that was approved in 2017 when the demolition and rebuild of the property with the roof extension was approved as appeal. The permissions are significant material considerations because the council have previously agreed that the proposal for the roof is acceptable. There are no significant changes in the planning context that we're viewing this application in tonight. It was the same local plan we made the previous decision under. And although we have new residential extension guidelines, the material and principles in relation to roof extensions haven't changed, and the assessment that is in the report about this particular roof is not altered by that change in the regs. The previous history, therefore, of those applications hold significant weight in this case. In relation to the impact on neighbours, it's not considered that the proposal would significantly impact the living conditions of the neighbouring units. The side windows facing 162 Duke Road would be obscurely glazed, and the new roof level windows are at that upper roof level. So as not to represent any significant loss of privacy. In relation to appearance, it's clear from the report, and the report sets out that it would represent a significant change in the appearance of this building, but it also highlights that the house in its current form has a distinct character within the street. Given its unique design and plot, the new roof would not be harmful to the special local character of the surrounding estate and the surrounding area. And it's been highlighted in some of the objections you might have read that there is a proposal to designate this area as a conservation area. It isn't a conservation area at the moment. The consultation responses for that proposal are still being assessed and reviewed, and there is still no decision as a council as to whether the proposal will progress to a recommendation to make this a conservation area. So then going back to those material considerations that we had in front of us when we made the previous roof extension decisions, we are considering this as it has to be on the basis that the site isn't in a conservation area at the moment. Continuing on the kind of impact on the street scene, the new mansard roof would be below the pitch gable of 166 Duke Road, which is the brick building next door. It wouldn't be read overly dominant within the street, and that is the same conclusion that the appeal inspector reached in 2016-2017 for the one of those previous schemes. The proposal would be proportionate to the plot and the components of the original property, and importantly, keep that roof parapet balustrade, which is considered to be a distinguishing feature of the property. On the basis of that, we are recommending approval subject to those conditions outlined in the report. And there is nothing in the addendum report relating to this case that I need to highlight. So, thanks.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Okay, so we now move to the objector. Peter Newman, if you'd like to come forward. To the table on its own, yes. You have 5 minutes, and then 30 seconds before the end, you'll be warned that there's 30 seconds. Okay.
Brilliant.
So, and we'll start the timing when you start.
Okay, fantastic. Right, thanks for your time. Oh, cool, excellent. Much easier. Thanks for your time this evening. As you know, Peter Newman from 162 Duke Road. I'm also representing the interests of our neighbours at Devonshire Passage on the south side of the property. A few words on the Glebe estate. Understand the introductory statements about conservation status not yet being granted. However, the Glebe estate is, I believe, and I think there's an amount of evidence and research in the public domain, Glebe estate is of historic interest. The house at 164 Duke Road was actually the first property built in that estate. There is quite a bit of variation in the street. Nevertheless, the proposed changes will definitely have an impact to the property. And I'd ask planning committee, if they've not been and walked down that street, that they should perhaps consider it. Comments about the roof line. The proposed changes will actually add a whole new level to the roof of this house. In the planning report and in the addendum, there's comments there about other houses having constructed large roof extensions. Nevertheless, this roof extension is completely out of character with every other one on the street. It will be incredibly obvious from the street view. It will destroy the character of the street and the area. From a safety perspective, this particular area and the map that was shown and the photos that were shown are remarkably flat. You actually have to go and see at all times during the day the amount of traffic, the children, the people using Devonshire Passage as a thoroughfare. There's comments in here that would be suggestive that actually this is a detached property, and technically it is. But in fact, the space between this house and the adjoining properties is less than 2 meters. Both properties actually share a party wall with this property. So it is in fact close enough that the Party Wall Act is in place. There is a loss of light for ourselves at 162 Duke Road and a loss of light for 164. And even though the construction works aren't really, and the duration of the construction works don't necessarily impact your decision, it's going to be a year, and there are 2 schools on this cul-de-sac. There's a public thoroughfare, Devonshire Passage, which is in use 24/7. The gap between, or the gap at which Devonshire Road emerges is less than 3 meters wide. So while these works are going on, even if it's not grounds to uphold my objection, there's definitely a requirement to put some additional safety measures in place. Yeah, I'm rather flustered because I've come late, unfortunately. I think that pretty much characterizes or summarizes all of the concerns that I had. I guess probably the final comment is, the house itself is going to double in size, which doesn't sound, well, it sounds actually quite outrageous to me, but it's literally going to be out of character with every other property in that street. This journey that we've been on has been 6 years of planning submissions, 6 submissions, local petitions of 133 signatures opposing the proposed works. The surrounding neighborhood is definitely not on board with the proposals that are being made over this 6-year period.
Thank you very
Slightly
much
early.
indeed. Yes, you're well in time. Okay, so it's now over to councillors to ask you questions. If you might as well keep your mask off because
Fantastic.
it'd be easier to speak that way.
Yep, totally.
Okay, so I'll look round to the councillors. I'd like to ask you anyone like to ask any questions? Councillor John Todd.
Good evening.
Hi, John.
I think we met. Yes, you know my name.
We have met, yes.
Declare an interest. I know I've met you before.
Totally, yes.
Okay. I have done, as you suggested, visited the site. I know the site very well. You're absolutely correct when you say it's a hub of activity of cars, parking. But I think that's all peripheral to what you're here today, and what you're challenging. Yeah. And I have read these papers carefully and speaking to other people. You appreciate that precedent is important. And I want to be as clinical as I can, but other people, the inspectors, have upheld previous applications, as the head of planning mentioned. It follows, so the advice from our lawyers and others, that we must accept those rulings. So I suppose the acid test for you then is, and I've got an open mind, on what grounds can I reject what they say?
Okay. I mean, I think most of the statements that are being made in support of it is that these changes will not impact the character of the streetscape. It most definitely will. It's going to be an additional story higher than it is at the moment. The roof line and all of the other extensions in the street, the roof line and the changes to roof lines for those roof extensions have not been evident from the front of the property, and it is most definitely going to be evident. I think text is suggestive that it's detached and that it is already of unique character and therefore it won't be changing, but there's a huge amount of variation in this street, and I'd argue that actually it's representative of quite a few other buildings in the street itself. I think, finally, precedents are important. This house was the first house built in the Glebe estate, and therefore, irrespective of conservation status, I do believe it's of historic interest. My understanding and the research that we've done indicates that Reckitt and Benckiser, Joseph Quick, who went on to basically be the architect of the waterworks for Manhattan and for most of West London, they all were involved in the development of this house. The architect that actually laid out the plans for the whole Glebe estate also lived in that house. Thanks, John.
Just looking to see if any other questions. Have I got any other questions for? Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. So even though we've moved everything round, I still managed not to see you. Sorry, Richard. Okay, Councillor Richard Foote.
Yeah, I apologise. I'm not familiar with this street, but I mean, I've looked and read everything on it. But can you just tell me one thing? Is this house, in the pictures that I have, are distinctly different to the house on either side of it? Is there any similar properties down the street? This particular, is it 164?
Yeah, so down on the corner of Reckitt and Duke Road, which is only about 300 or 400 metres down, there's another property very similar. There are a number of properties, the exact number and specific locations I can't enumerate, but there are a number of properties within the bounds of the Glebe estate, which is effectively Duke Road to Devonshire Road, and then Fraser, Reckitt, Quick, Binns, and also Dale. There's at least half a dozen properties that have a similar fronting, similar height, similar character. So it's not unique in the Glebe estate.
So is this, I mean, is it historic in terms of, these buildings, this particular type of building, built in a different period to some of the other buildings that are there?
I'm not an historian to that extent.
No, I just thought you'd be you might know.
I believe, the research showing that it was the first building in the Glebe estate. It's at the lower end of the Glebe estate. The way that it was developed, there were properties towards the high road which were more expensive, and properties towards what is now the A4 that were cheaper. So it was the first built down that end. It's very hard to say precisely when these other buildings were built.
I wasn't thinking precisely. I was just thinking if it's in a different era that they were built. I'm trying to get in my head why that building should look so different to the ones either side of it.
So we're going back to
other than some of those others having been demolished.
There was some German demolition done on Duke Road, but that's
I was thinking of something a bit more deliberate than that.
I know. So the Glebe estate was granted by the Church of England in 1840. This property, as we understand it, was right at the Chiswick house end of the Glebe estate, and that the house in the Mews, Devonshire Passage, was, we believe, the coach house for this property. And our house and the three houses immediately adjacent were the garden for this house. So this house obviously had quite a lot of presence in the 1840s and through to 1870, 1890s. It would have been very different, because unlike a lot of the other properties, there was a garden, there was a coach house. There were some fairly well-to-do folk using this property to lay out the Glebe estate itself. So, it's definitely built at a different time from other properties. There's a couple of what used to be public houses with a very similar character and look and feel on Duke Road and immediately off Duke Road. And there are other properties on Dale Street, which is the parallel street to Duke Road, that also have a similar character. So exactly when they were all built, I don't know. But this one has a date and stamped on the front of it. So I suspect it's different because it was used for different purposes. It was used by different people, and it was very early on in the development of the estate. So everything else built around it obviously happened later, and therefore had a slightly different character.
So you could say the ones that came later didn't match the one that was already there.
Well, indeed. So possibly I've shot myself in the foot. But no, I mean, it obviously had a different precedence and and purpose in the Glebe estate. The other properties we gather were built for workers and for management in the Reckitt Benckiser factories. So that the properties outside of this one were built for workers, for lowly paid workers. Completely different purpose. It is unique in some ways because it was obviously used in a different way, but other buildings in the estate have a very similar character.
Okay, thank you.
Pleasure.
Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah. Oh, Mike.
Okay, thank you. Right. Yes, right. I've got Councillor Guy Lambert. I've got you, Tony.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, irrespective of whether this is a nice design or not, and that's a different matter.
By the way,
What I'm struggling a bit with is what, in terms of planning law, where any kind of contravention of planning law is here, because we talk about heritage and so on, but it's not a conservation area. And that that might be a mistake, but that's that's a fact of the matter.
Yeah.
But it's not at this point a conservation area. So, I mean, for us as a committee, if we're going to turn this down, we have to turn it down with something which is sustainable. When if the applicant appeals and goes to the inspector. I don't see there's anything, I haven't heard anything here which says that if we wanted to turn it down, that we'd have valid planning grounds for doing so.
Sure. So, and clearly I'm not a planning law expert. So, there's definitely that. I think, basically, it is violating the London plan in terms of the way that it's going to violate the character of the street. And I think that's one of the main planning law basis for the objection. And beyond that, I'm not sure there's much, to be honest. One thing that I am quite concerned about is that it appears to us from the outside and to people that are more expert in this than ourselves, that there's been a deliberate strategy here of laying out numerous iterations of these planning proposals. The dates and the start dates and the end dates and all of these things have now become, we believe, deliberately quite difficult to understand. So, and one of the experts we have spoken to has indicated there have been a number of contraventions of in terms of dates and durations and delays between starts and things like that. And those are in some of well, actually in my neighbour once from Devonshire Passage, those are in her objection letter to council. They don't appear to have actually made it into the officer's addendum or into the report, which we've looked at. So procedural plus the contravention of the character and the London plan with regards to preservation of the character.
Councillor Tony Lukey. Thanks, Tony. Okay, so thank you very much, Peter Newman.
Thank you.
And I'm now going to ask Councillor Biddulph if you would come and speak to the committee. As you know, you have up to 5 minutes, and you will be warned 30 seconds before the end of that 5 minutes, and we will start the timing when you do. Okay.
Thank you very much indeed. I'd like to talk a little bit about the character of the area and perhaps answer some of the questions that have been asked in this first section. If you haven't visited it, you won't know it at all. If you visited it, you know it a little, but it's really only when you've lived there that you understand the really unique, you're looking quizzical as if you can't hear me. No, sorry. Okay, all right. The really different uniqueness of this little estate, which isn't an identikit estate. To come back to something that Richard said, there is a similarity across the whole area in that most of the buildings are roughly the same size. They were built as 2 up, 2 downs. And the roof lines are very similar, but every road has a little bit of difference from the previous one, and every house has a little bit of difference from a couple of others in the same road. So there is a very strong sense of similarity, but no identicateness. And it doesn't look, thank you very much for picking up those two photos, because they're better than the rather less attractive ones that were shown earlier. It is a very significant building, and it's rather handsome. The others are pretty. This is slightly less decorative, I suppose, but it is handsome. One of the similarities is the roof line, as I've mentioned. There's nothing to break up the character of the area or the sympathetic nature of it in the roof lines. All the extensions have been within the pitched roofs, and this is the first one to go up that's going to be significantly higher and break the line, as well as out of character in terms of shape and out of sync with the rest of the road. There was an objection letter that came from Richard Schwarzkopf, I'm afraid I can't say his last name, who is a noted local historian and researcher, and he points out one aspect which might help Councillor Lambert, which is when he says, "We wish to object to the above application on the grounds that the proposed ridge height substantially exceeds that of the existing building. This is in manifest contradiction of LB Hounslow's guidelines." And the guidelines are the Residential Extension Guidelines, Supplementary Planning Document, a guide for householders dated 2017. Any proposed roof extension that exceeds or raises the ridge height of the property will normally be refused. And that is a really significant point. It's by a local researcher. He and his wife, Tracy Logan, who's also an award-winning broadcaster and producer of programs and researcher, they're both noted historians. They've put together a talk and a research paper about the Glebe Estate, which was runner-up in this year's National British Awards for Local History. So they know what they're talking about, and they know that this is a very significant area in Chiswick. It is in fact, and this again answers, I think, Richard's point, Chiswick's first Victorian working class housing estate. So that's where it comes from. It's all built in the Victorian era as a working class housing estate. Obviously, it's been gentrified as much as the borough has, and its terraced houses are notable. Sorry? Well, maybe more so, but actually, if you look at them, they've really retained their integrity. And so when Tracy and Richard say something, you can be sure that it is of great significance. The house is, as Peter has said, of historical value. It's one of the oldest in the Glebe Estate. And the development here has been extremely and repeatedly controversial. And that's why I'm here, really. The representations from locals have gone on for years. And this is a very tricky, and I think it's a very greedy application, actually, because of the way in which it's pushing boundaries. There may well be boundaries that you have to abide by, but it is of significance and of very great, the huge numbers of objections locally, 133, I think it was that you said, to the petition that there was. So I just wanted you to understand the character a bit more. It is very small. It's about 450, maybe 500 houses, bound by Devonshire Road and Duke Road, and then 5 houses going across and 1 short house coming down. Immense similarity and yet subtle differences that give it a very interesting and unique character in Chiswick, and it was, as I said, Chiswick's first Victorian working class house estate. So I urge you to reject the application. There are other things that can be done with this house that keep it in character with the rest of the estate. The mansard roof is an abomination. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, questions. Councillor John Todd.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Biloff. I readily endorse your comments about the history of the area and the uniqueness of the estate. Although you can hardly believe that they're now worth £2 million for little workers' cottages, which indicates there's been a clearance too, but I digress. Sorry, there's an echo in the room, Chair. I'll ignore that.
I don't think they've quite hit the 2 million barrier, but I know what you're saying.
Well, you won't get one for 100 grand. All right, let's move on. You heard, I thought, I tried to ask a fair question of the first person, and this is the planning committee, not a conservation approval. And I think you've mentioned guidelines dated 2017, which I respect and note. But I'm struggling to get round the comments of Ms. Scannell alluding to, in layman's terms, I emphasise that it's been approved previously. and you didn't address that aspect. I'm trying to give you the opportunity to put that in context. The person requesting talks about the roof. Would you get it's a very subjective sort of view, or would you think it's more sustainable? He forms a view about the mansard. I forget what he said, but you may like it, I don't. But I think that's all subjective. The planning law is a separate thing that we've got to respect, and I've listened to you very carefully, so I'm giving you the opportunity to develop that if I could.
It's a completely different shape from all the other roofs. It's not visible. I don't think the drawing helps. I think one of the problems is that the drawings that have been submitted by the applicant aren't as clear as they could be. I think there's a lack of transparency. The roofs are pitched, and this is a completely different shape, and it rises above the very pretty balustrade and would clash in terms of the skyline. All the others are roofline, rather. All the others are straight, and this is of a very strange shape. They have already gone down into the basement, so they're already a 3-story house in an area where there are 2-story houses. Well, they're all 2-story houses. Any extensions that have been made have been within the roofline, and so there's been no change there. This is building up and out to go higher, and it's already bigger than a Glebe Estate house. And beyond the guidelines, I'm afraid the guidelines are all I have to go on. I'm sorry, I'm also not. Yeah.
Later, yeah.
Well, there definitely will be an opportunity for councillors to ask Sarah any questions. Okay, and then there'll be room for comments after that. Okay, that's not a problem. Okay, any other councillor want to ask Councillor Biddulph any question? I can't see anybody on this particular application. Thank you very much. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much. Okay, now we'll move over back to the applicant, please. Victoria Collette. Sorry? Okay. Do you want to? Okay, we may need to open one of those doors, maybe the one at the back if necessary. If they can. Okay. Okay, Victoria, it's absolutely the same thing. You have 5 minutes and you'll be warned 30 seconds before the end of that 5 minutes. So you have up to five minutes to speak, and we will time you from when you start. And have you got it's the middle one?
Thank you. It's just like on Teams, I always forget to press on mute. Thank you for your time this evening. I don't intend to speak for very long because I think that the planning officer's report really summarises the planning issues to do with the application. So I've only really attended, I suppose, to speak up for myself because, well, I think it's been implied that I'm greedy this evening and various other things. So that's why I'm here. Sneaky in deliberately submitting many planning applications. That has not been our intention. For 6 years, for 6 years, we've been trying to renovate this house, which is damp inside and drafty and just a very unpleasant place to live in the 18 months that we lived in it, which is why we applied for the planning consent to change the roof in the first place, because we were advised that the existing roof, which is this very boring detail, but it's half flat and half a shallow pitch, where the two join, is a weak point in the design that will, it's just a weak point in the design. If you have a flat roof and a shallow pitch, it's always going to suffer or be likely to suffer from damp, and it does. We've had it repaired, allegedly repaired 3 times. The previous owner who lived there before had it repaired twice. We had completely useless guarantees from the people who had repaired it for her. So that is why we applied to change the roof shape in the first place to a roof that will not leak, which is the mansard shape. Another roof type that would not leak is a pitched roof, but that would be totally out of keeping with the era of the house. And even though the houses next door have got pitched roofs, it suits them. It wouldn't suit this house because of its orientation. I'm not an architect, but I think anyone could see that a pitched roof would look wrong behind the balustrade. In answer to the mansard being higher than other houses in the estate, I think that's been addressed by the planning officer. That's not the case. It will be about the same height as the existing roofs to the north and lower than the house to the south. So I don't think that's really true. So to return to the successive planning applications, when we started the works for the extension, we found out that much of the house had been rebuilt very badly. So it's not as Victorian as it looks. In fact, it's very little of it is Victorian, which I was devastated about. Nobody loves this area more than me. I have not objected to the conservation area consultation because I think the area should be protected. I love the area. I'm just throwing that in there to show you that I respect and appreciate the heritage of the area and have done a great deal of research myself. The house was not built by the people who built the Glebe estate. That was recognised by the planning inspector at our appeal. So please disregard reference to that. Sorry, back to the other planning applications. Yes, so we found out it wasn't Victorian and we were advised by an engineer to demolish it. That's why we applied for planning permission to demolish and rebuild it, which we won on appeal. We were not able to implement that permission due to our neighbours not allowing us access to their land. And then we had to go back to square one to the refurbishment, which is where we are now. In the meantime, I've lived abroad, I've had 2 children, time passes, that's why it's been 6 years. You only need to watch Grand Designs to see that development projects are beset with problems, and we've had most of them befall us. So that's it. If anyone would like to ask me any questions, I will do my best to answer.
Thank you. Okay, so Councillor John Todd, do you have any questions?
Yes. Hi. That was an interesting story. When did you actually buy it?
We bought it in May 2011.
Okay. And can I get your view as to this new roof? I'm sure you've heard my question about it being a subjective view on whether it's above or below. How would you describe the roof? And do you agree with the officer on your right that what you're applying for now is in essence what you got permission from the inspectorate or not?
Oh, absolutely. It's exactly the same dimensions, design, finishes. There's nothing different about it. Oh, except for the symmetry of the windows.
Okay,
I've
well, I think
made them symmetrical instead of slightly offset.
Just to clarify that. So can you clarify what you mean by what is the variation? Is it in height, width, or what?
Sorry, the symmetry. You can't see on that diagram very well, but the 2 windows on the first floor, on the front face of the house, both on the first floor and the new ones in the new roof, have been moved by 10 centimetres to make them symmetrical, because I'm a perfectionist and I wanted it to be symmetrical. It's always bothered me that when you look at it, it's not quite square.
And I'm curious, I mean, you've told a very eloquent story. Why, when you got one on appeal, why didn't you proceed?
I won't bore you with the details, but we couldn't get permission to demolish either through legal means or through negotiation. So we had to abandon it.
Okay, anybody else got any questions for the applicant? Looking around. I can't see anybody. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Okay.
Thank you. I'm sorry I got upset.
Don't worry, that's okay. Okay, now right, we now move to questions from councillors to Sarah Scannell, please, based on her presentation and everything you've heard, including the objections, as well as and what's in the report. Okay, so Councillor Michael Dennis.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks, Councillor. I just wanted to ask about the first objector who made the point about the space between the walls being less than 2 metres. And he said it might be against the Party Wall Act. I just wanted your view on that.
Yeah, so I mean, the kind of in in its biggest sense, the Party Wall Act isn't something for us to consider today. It's not an act that's governed by the council. It's very much, and I think, as the applicant has suggested, it's in the civil acts between the neighbours. So it wouldn't be part of the planning consideration, but effectively for information, it's where you've got something that crosses the boundary or near to the boundary, you have to gain agreement from the neighbouring properties. So it is the case that some of the properties are very close together in this case. That's absolutely correct. But that has formed part of the assessment when we've looked at the neighbour impact and then in how it would look in terms of the street scene.
Okay. Thank you. No further questions. Thank you.
Councillor John Todd.
Yeah, Mr. Hannell, help me with this. Someone, however, gets permission for an identical roof, and yet you accept a fresh application for the same approved roof. Can you clarify how that took place?
I mean, there's nothing technically in planning law that stops someone submitting the same thing again and again and again, unless there's a technical thing if you've got an enforcement case. But in this case, it has expired. That first permission has lapsed, so they did need to kind of start it again to enable them to build it out. In this case,
can I clarify what you said earlier? I'm not suggesting you misled us. Are you quite satisfied that the roof being applied for now is identical in every aspect to the first one? There was a variation mentioned about windows that they may not be material, but
yeah, absolutely. It's in terms of the scale of the proposal and the position of the roof, it's the same that has been considered by us previously and the inspector. And the changes to the windows are from the officer's perspective, minor changes to the approval to the previous scheme that doesn't impact that strategic and the overarching theme of it's the same scale, position, size of roof that would be that's presented to us for decision.
Okay, I'm just looking to see if any other councillors has questions for Sarah. Richard?
Can I just bring you, Sarah, to para 7.14? And the reference is there to the fact that this house has got a lower pitch gable, it refers to 166 Duke Road. And looking at the photographs that we have, which show the houses on either side and what we had up there earlier, those houses look like they've got considerably higher roofs than the current one. I understand that's current. It's not necessarily in the plan. So does the plan actually bring it that much higher than the existing roofs?
Yes, sorry, I was just trying to get the photo up for you, but if we go to the one
that's the one. Yeah. There's another one we had where we saw
of the front. Yeah, that one. So if we stick on this one, the mansard roof would appear taller than the neighbouring roof here because the ridge, it will be higher than the ridge of the neighbouring roof here, and not hugely taller, but it will be. But it will be visually different because you will see that mansard roof from the road.
Yeah.
The difference and the importance difference between the mansard roof and the usual roof extension we get is that we would never usually approve a front roof extension on a normal pitched or gable-ended house because it's all contained at the back. But when you've got a roof like this that's got a very shallow pitch or a flat roof, the only way to extend that property at roof level is to introduce a mansard. And it's a very common feature, not in our borough, and our residential extension guidelines reflect that it's not a common extension that we see. But if you go to closer into Tower Hammersmith, you get the flat roofed extensions that are always flat roofed houses that are usually extended by a mansard. So it is going to be a visual change to the roof. It's going to appear as an additional story whilst it's set back, and it goes back, and it will be subordinate to the main house, but it will appear taller than the neighbouring property in this picture. But if we can go to the other picture that shows the other side, which is the what you just go that
there we go. Oh, you're gone again.
Sorry.
Oh, dear.
Sorry, it will be shallower than that one because the neighbouring property has a front gable end, which is at its height is visible from the front.
Can I ask then, given that
There.
circumstance and what you said about that's the one I was meaning, which is
Yeah.
considerably higher. But what you've been saying about mansard roofs and the fact, and I accept that they're more familiar across the border into Hammersmith. Given those circumstances, would that be something that would be significant in any kind of if we rejected this planning application, but it went to appeal? Is that likely to be something that would feature significantly?
Mainly because we've approved the mansard previously. So the appeal inspector in the previous application that was for, as you've heard it referred to tonight, the demolition and rebuild that had the roof extension in the basement, said that they acknowledged that it was a change in the visual appearance of this property. It was an addition to the roof, but it would maintain the overall character and appearance of that property. And I think what the inspector had in front of them at that time that decision was made was the details of the historic nature of the property and the surrounding estate, which has been talked about and not disagreed with tonight. But the inspector also had a clear understanding and made it clear that there has been lots of intrusions done to this property. It's not of the finest quality of a house of its time, so it wouldn't warrant preservation in its own right on that basis. So the fact that they've proposed this mansard that we've approved previously is very much a material consideration and would be considered by any inspector if it were to get to them again.
Okay. Yep. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I'm just looking. There is no right. Doesn't look like anyone else has any questions. Comments, please. Proposals, anything? Councillor Gary Grewal.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to move this application for approval on the basis, technically speaking, mansard roof is the answer, because mansard roof provides more headroom and the room looks like absolutely square.
Right, I've got a seconder for that. Is that Councillor Harleen Atwill Hill? That's fine. Okay, anybody else? Right, so I have approval on the floor, as it were. I'll take that vote now. Those in favour of approval, would you please show? Okay, thank you. That looks like all. Yep, that's everybody. Okay, so that has been approved. Thank you all very much. Does anyone want to fight a quick 2-minute interval, or are you happy to proceed, people? Anybody need a break? No? Okay, we'll move on then to agenda item 4, which is Chiswick Business Park. Okay, right, Sarah, your show tonight, I'm afraid.
Just this one, and then you'll.
Yes, I know.
Be gone.
Don't worry. Okay, over to you.
Thank you.
Before we start, I keep forgetting this. I'm terribly sorry. I know you've all read your papers, so you all know. This is obviously this is pages 9 to 35, so it's at the beginning of your agenda. And there is some addendum somewhere. Here we go. Yes, on page 2. And I also just want to draw your attention, which I've already drawn, we've already had, is obviously there's some possible other conditions that may be needed to be added to this should we decide that we wish to approve. Anyway, over to, sorry. No, not yet, no. No. Okay, so over to Sarah.
Thank you. So this is the application for the allocation of 500 parking spaces within the Chiswick Business Park to use as matchday parking for Brentford Football Club. The site, the Chiswick Business Park is on the site in front of you. Chiswick Business Park is a modern office development. Many of you will know it. It provides circa 180,000 square metres of office floor space. The business park is access directly off Chiswick High Road, opposite the Gunnersbury Station. It has a railway line to the east and residential properties of Silver Crescent on the west. I think we've got a few of these slides just show some of the go around the site, showing the boundary treatment. And you will all know this, but Brentford Football Club now occupy the Brentford Community Stadium at Lionel Road South, and it's fully operational. Part of the original scheme for that that stadium targeted securing 1,000 off-site car parking spaces in sites around the stadium for that match day provision. What we have in front of us today is the application for 500 spaces within the Chiswick Business Park. The spaces allocated are shown on the blue in this site, so they're on the boundaries to the east and west of the site. In principle, in planning terms, the use of the existing car parking spaces for this parking is acceptable. It is already an existing car park, and I've already mentioned those spaces that, off-site spaces were secured as part of the original scheme. While some of those spaces in the original scheme were anticipated at the time the decision was made to be on the Great West Road, since that time, those sites have either become available or not possible at this time. And Chiswick Business Park has always been one of those locations that was considered, albeit for less number than 500, but it has always been in the mix. So in relation to the impact on neighbours, as we've outlined in the report that we expect there to be limited impact on neighbours. The evening use of the site for parking is obviously going to be a departure from the usual use of that site for an office development. So you've presumably daytime parking, but overall will result in moderate levels of noise and disturbance. And we've talked at length in the report about the boundary treatment. And I know the objectors do disagree with us on that point, but even the fact that we've got in front of us is that there is a boundary treatment between Silver Crescent and Chiswick Business Park. The management plan does state, and the application does agree to a phasing of these spaces, and we can, in front of us today, can explore whether we secure that the spaces on the other side of the site are occupied before you get to those car parking spaces alongside Silver Crescent, which I think has been accepted by the applicants and would be an amendment to the condition if that was something that the committee would like to take forward. Also to note is that the car parking spaces will be managed between this private management team and the Chiswick Business Park themselves, so it is likely to be below that 500 that we're kind of maximum green to now, and the parking, even at its 500, has been tested by our transport colleagues, and TfL are satisfied that it, even with the numbers proposed here and the timing of those movements, it wouldn't impact the surrounding roads and access and movements to and from the site. On that basis, the application is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions outlined in the report. And just to highlight what is in the addendum in relation to this scheme, it's confirmation of those TfL final comments that they're satisfied with the application. Summary of the recent changes to the CPZ in the surrounding streets. And that's it. So on that basis, we're recommending approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so let's move on to the objector, please. I'll just remind you, Marie, as usual, 5 minutes, and you'll be warned 30 seconds before the end.
Thank you. Before you start my 5 minutes, could I ask for the visuals to be put up, and particularly if you could start with the plan that I provided.
Okay.
Thank you. Right, I'm starting my 5 minutes now. So thank you, Chairman, and good evening. What I want to say is we are in uncharted waters because it was never intended that the Chiswick Business Park would provide such a significant proportion of the 1,000 off-street car parking spaces. At the most, it would have been up to 250. The reasons why the 750 couldn't be found on the Great West Road is outside this meeting. We have studied the planning officer's report, and so to be pragmatic, we can see that clearly it will be recommended. So what we're asking is that if you're minded to approve this application, you provide some safeguards for the local community by including 2 additional conditions within the permission and an addition to the stadium car park management plan, as described in the document that we sent you earlier this week. The conditions would ensure that, firstly, that car parking spaces along the western side of the site adjacent to residential properties in Silver Crescent would be the last to be used and only if needed, subject to capacity. Second condition is that spectator car parking would not be permitted when events are being held within the business park. I'll come back to both these points in a minute. We'd also like a statement on meaningful community engagement to be included in the stadium car park management plan, with a commitment to making the monitoring results referred to in the planning officer's report available to the community engagement group. This used to be known as the Lionel Road Liaison Group, and it is a Section 106 requirement within the legal agreement on this. And we think that would give the council some actually informed feedback if that information was shared with us. We would also ask for that the permission require the provision of toilet facilities for spectators. But what I want to focus on now is the impact on Silver Crescent. And if you look at that plan, on the left-hand side, you see the perimeter car parking, which runs alongside Silver Crescent. And if you look at the blue section beneath the pink section, if you can see those colours, this is the key section we're talking about. And it's slightly greyed out on the plan. But if you look at Silver Crescent, particularly the top end of Silver Crescent, you will notice that as you go further up to the top of the crescent there, the gardens actually get smaller. And I have to say, although I'm speaking as chairman of the West Chiswick and Gunnersbury Society, I happen to live in one of those properties, so I have a lot of experience. They are very short gardens, they're Victorian terraces, and the acoustics of the business park and of our properties is such that any sounds within the business park ricochet between the big steel and glass buildings, and they are funneled up the side extensions of our houses. I have heard noises from the business park in my bedroom that have woken me, and yet if I go out in the garden, I couldn't hear them. The acoustics are very peculiar, but we hear sounds. That perimeter car park is just a very short space from the end of our gardens. There is a buffer planting, but it's visually attractive, but it doesn't create much of a sound barrier. And as I've pointed out, and if you could show some of the photos that are provided, that indicates the nearness of some of the properties. That's a property near the top end of Silver Crescent. That's one in the sort of middle section. There's another photo, that's another middle section. You can see that's a notice in the car park. And that's just the evidence that unfortunately, due to disease, several of the mature, they weren't that mature, but several of the trees have recently been removed. So it's even less of a barrier than it was. But the point is, what I would ask you to think about is the cumulative impact on the residents of Silver Crescent with noise from the business park. We're at a planning committee meeting, but I don't know whether you're aware, but there was recently a licensing panel where they agreed a very significant extension to the event license for the business park. So the cumulative impact, 40 football or rugby matches a year.
30 seconds left.
And in addition to that, we have all the very noisy events in the park. So it is the cumulative impact on the residents. So as I say, we're not asking you to refuse, we're asking you to please give some thought to the residents and please add the 2 conditions and the other 2 requirements that we have requested. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, any questions? I'll just have a quick look. Right, Councillor Tony Lukey.
Yeah, thank you for that, and thank you for the for sending us that email. I'm interested in this for other reasons. And it's not that I support Brentford, because I don't. You mentioned the Lionel Road Liaison Group, and I know my friend Councillor Guy Lambert had been involved in this too. When was the last time they met? And what was this discussion there?
They met quite recently. In fact, we met within the new stadium, and it is a useful forum, obviously, like many other meetings, etc. During the pandemic, we haven't been able to meet as easily as possible. But it is something that was set up, as I said, within the legal agreement, the Section 106, that there should be such a group composed of residents, local councillors, the football, the rugby, to discuss issues. So all I'm asking, because within the planning officer's report for this particular thing, it refers to the fact that there will be meetings between the stadium and the council to look at what happens, because they're going to monitor how this works. All we're saying is, can you include the information, provide it to the Lionel Road Liaison Group, or community engagement is what are they called now? Whatever. Yes, so that we can see that data and comment on it to provide feedback to the council so that they can make informed decisions about the impact. So I think community engagement is very important, and I just would like a relevant statement to be included within I think it's the stadium car park management plan, because these management plans aren't set in stone. They can be amended as time goes on. So that was something we really wish to see, so that we can give our feedback and that can be taken on board.
Right. You're okay. Okay, that's fine. We'll come back to her in a minute. Okay. Is there any other questions? I don't think so. I think everyone's. Oh, so yes, do come on, Tony.
Right. The trees are not Brentford football clubs. They're not their they're not their they're not the organisation that they've appointed to do the car parking. What liaison have you had with the council and with the with Chiswick Business Park owners to get those trees replaced? Because when that was set out, no doubt there was a landscaping plan. No doubt you paid attention to that. But what efforts have been made to get those trees replaced?
I believe I'd have to check back. I believe the comments that we sent on this application in March and the later ones, I think we certainly referred to the fact that the trees had been missing. And I did have an informal discussion with the sort of head gardener, because when I saw that trees were being taken down, I said, how come you've removed the trees? And he explained that one or two of them were diseased. And I asked him at the time, I said, well, I hope you're going to plant some replacement trees. And he said, we hadn't thought about it. And I said, well, I would be very grateful if you would think about it. But I've not formally, other than in the comments on this, asked them. And clearly they look after all the landscaping in the park very well. But the thing to recall is, when you're in the business park, you're on the campus, you're kind of in that bubble. What you don't think about is what is the other side of the trees or the wall. And as I say, what is the other side are these extremely small gardens. And as I say, and the other thing, of course, is that the buffer planting is a mix. So in the winter months, which is when the car parking will be taking place, it provides even less of a screen because the trees lose their leaves. So we would very much appreciate some replanting where possible of suitable species within that buffer zone. And you're right, the buffer zone was always part of going back to, the very first. I mean, you can see this thing is P63, so you can see how many planning applications we have dealt with on the Chiswick Business Park since it started. And the buffer planting in fact, some of the planting was already there from when it was the London Transport Bus Works. But, you know, maintaining that buffer planting is extremely important.
Well, perhaps you're going to have to chase the planning officers. They've got a couple here today to pick up on that. And because often, Chair, we find that some landscape, you know, we approve landscaping, or we allow officers to approve landscaping through delegated, and you know, we kind of leave them to it. Not the officers, we leave the developers or the applicants to it, and we don't monitor that. And then later on, we find, as we did with Homebase, oh, it's been neglected, you know, and yeah, let's redevelop. But that's an extreme example. But you know, perhaps we should monitor that a little bit more. But it's up to people like yourselves to put that through formally.
As the operations manager of the business park is here and listening to us, perhaps he'll ensure that something is done.
Okay. Well, I was actually going to say it also perhaps is something that Brentford Football Club can do as part of, you know, their negotiations with Chiswick Business Park, to actually mention the fact that perhaps that screening is not as buffering as it appeared on the plans, as it were. So that might be something that they can think about. I don't think there's any other questions for you, Marie. Thank you ever so much. Okay, so it's now over to, we have 3 people. Okay, we're going to take a part. Timing is going to, what we'll probably do is we'll just time the 5 minutes. I'm sure you know how quickly 5 minutes will go, but we will still warn you when 30 seconds is at the end, but we won't worry about the in-between bits. Okay, so, okay, Sally, I presume we'll be starting.
Thank you, Chair. I've been employed by the club since 2015 and been directly involved in our work to secure the 1,000 off-site car parking spaces that we committed to as part of our Section 106 obligations for Brentford Community Stadium. The principal reason for doing so was to try to minimise any disruption on local residential streets, which would be caused by supporters both home and away who wouldn't be so familiar driving round and round trying to find somewhere to park. As part of our commitment over the years, we have employed both a property agent and a car parking operator to ensure we manage things as efficiently as possible. As you will probably appreciate, the location of the stadium, as with many sites in London, is quite challenging in terms of finding car parking that's within a reasonable walking distance. And over the years, we've contacted over 40 different businesses and schools, and we've also rejected another site at Strand-on-the-Green Primary School as a result of concerns from local residents, as it would seem to be too disruptive. So an ideal site, in our opinion, near the stadium is Chiswick Business Park, which you will have seen was identified initially in our 2013 transport assessment.
As representative of Chiswick Business Park, the club and the business park management team have engaged over the last couple of years, particularly in creating and developing operational plans for the accommodation of up to 500 car parking spaces in both a safe and effective way. We are very keen, as our community engagement, that there is minimal disruption to not only our guests and our visitors at the business park, but also to our local community. And ensuring that we will continue to review all operational requirements and support in this partnership. So far, the club has operated on 6 occasions at the business park without any impact to any of our guests and our visitors at the park. At the recent Arsenal game, there were 184 cars booked for that evening's parking.
By way of closing, I want to reiterate that the club and the board are fully committed to operating the Chiswick Park site in a way that is both efficient and professionally managed and is sensitive to the lives and welfare of our neighbours. We're here for the long term. We want to be good neighbours, and we believe that having this car park in operation on match days is part of doing that. It may be that the numbers may only very infrequently get anywhere near the 500 mark. Arsenal was a sellout game and we didn't reach 200 cars, for example. There are times when this will be absolutely critical. At the upcoming Chelsea game in the middle of October, South Western Railway have planned engineering works, so there will be no trains in operation and buses and tubes will struggle to cope. We'll continue to adapt the list of sites that we use, and we have by including the old Citroen site near the stadium as a temporary option. But without Chiswick Park, there will be anything up to 500 cars driving around trying to find a space for this game, and that will cause far more disruption to residents in this area. Chiswick Park is quite simply the best and most vital option we have at the stadium. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, questions. Councillor Guy Lambert.
Thank you for that. Marie for the West Chiswick Gardensbury Society has mentioned a couple of conditions that she'd like. What do you think about those conditions?
I think from the business park perspective and the representative, our operational plan at the moment is to fill the car parking spaces from the north quadrant that you see on the top left, immediately then follow over to the east side of the business park to fill, and only as a last resort would we use the car parking spaces on the west side adjacent to the neighbouring Silver Crescent. That already happens and has been part and forms part of the operational plan for the business park.
So it sounds like you're okay with that condition.
Yes, absolutely.
And the other one?
And the other one, remind me, apologies. The other condition. Apologies.
One of them was provision of toilets. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm sure you can.
It's probably easier if you say.
The second condition that we asked for was that they never used it for car parking when there's an event. And just to clarify, there is such a condition on the new licence that they will not have an event. So this is just to make it doubly clear. So it's both a planning requirement and a licence requirement that you either have an event or you have car parking, but you don't have both on the same.
Thank you. Yeah.
We'd have to take that away to look at that. I mean, obviously we have a plan of the year events of when any events were going to be, and that would be subject to obviously the Premier League and Rugby League's games that come out and those forecasted seasons. So it would be working in partnership to look at that.
But that's perfectly adequate to be able to talk to the Chiswick Business Park because you'll know when their events are and vice versa. So that's part and parcel of the, presumably, of the discussions.
We do, of course. The event calendar for football can change.
Well, we know that, yeah, that's okay. But I'm just saying it's that flexibility, and also the other point, which is about the liaison committee. I saw some nodding heads when Mari was talking about that. That's obviously not a problem, but it can be. We'll have to have that put down, I think, in writing somewhere, whatever in the plan. Yes. That's okay. Thank you. Guy, any others? Okay, Councillor Tony Lukey. Oh, sorry. Yeah, oh, right, Vikram. Yes, he hasn't. Yeah, I'll go with him first.
Thank you, Councillor Lukey. Thank you, Chair. It's good to see Brentford Football Club here, and wishing you all the best for the season. So a couple of questions. Sorry, when you speak, Lukey, Councillor Lukey, I'll let you do that. So a couple of questions I had, and my main actually area of contention with this has been addressed in the report on page 16. But going to matches, apologies, I haven't been to Brentford for a couple of years, but other matches, the main thing we see in car parks is antisocial behaviour, litter, and noise. And obviously, if we have 500 cars there, or potentially 500 spots, I know you're saying it's unlikely 500 will be filled, but hopefully there's a deep cup run and so forth, and there'll be a lot of buzz about the club. So how strictly will that be enforced? It says EST would have staff on the site at all times to deal with any behavioural issues and would clear away any litter on site before vacating it. How strictly will this be enforced? Because that's my big bugbear with all of this. I don't want to hinder the progress of the club and fans getting to the stadium because that's great, but we don't want litter and antisocial behaviour increasing because of it and congregating in that site and around it.
From my perspective, in terms of our work with enjoy work of the operators of the site, they've been quite rigorous and will hold us to account in terms of the behaviour of EST, and they'll be checking post-site to make sure that things have been all the rules have been adhered to, the litter's been cleared, etc. And they're also mandating quite a high number of staff on site, more than EST would usually put in place. So there will be a lot of staff around that can control any antisocial behaviour and make sure people clear the site as quickly as possible.
Chair, with your permission, a very small supplementary. So the amount of staff, would that vary on the amount of bookings, or is it a certain amount of staff irrespective?
I think there's a minimum amount of staff that would be required
Okay.
because you need to have people on check-in and people at the various locations. But there may be a small variation depending on how many cars are booked in.
That's
Is that
correct.
fair to
Yes.
say?
Yeah. And as I said, going back to the business park respectively, we would ensure that the EST would ensure that all the ASB, any ASB would be kept to a minimum and litter is cleared. We, as the Enjoy Work Estate Management team, also have our guest support, which is the security team on site. But the marshalling of those vehicles is very much with the partners at EST, which we would hold to account, obviously being on our property and our land, to ensure that there's no disruption to our guests and our visitors that are using the park as the general per se.
Brilliant. No further questions. Thank you.
Councillor John Todd.
Thank you. Good evening. You've also got a relationship with some Irish club in Reading. Yes.
Yeah.
Are they going to park their cars there?
They are, yes. But everything is managed by the same team. So it's all part and parcel and all the same rules will apply. We think there's probably going to be less people attending London Irish games. So potentially less spaces then being used, although they do tend to drive a bit more often, which is interesting.
Okay. Can I just develop that then? At Kew, they have pop concerts and other stuff. I mean, you've got a wonderful stadium. I love the word community, but we'll put that to one side. There's no affordable, but that's another story. Do you have intention of having pop concerts, or don't be emotive, other events?
We don't currently have planning permission
Okay.
for any events. And also the end of the season is very short in terms of pitch renovations, etc. So at the moment, as far as I'm aware, there's no intentions.
It's just a general inquiry. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
I know Marie, she's very balanced and sensible. There is a change of direction at the business park now. It's gone from a classic to slightly edgy. Zip wires and stuff. I'm not quite sure the correlation between good business and zip wires, but that's not for me to comment, is it? But do you adopt a noise level in the park that local residents can get a reassurance? I declare a trustee at Chiswick House, and some of our pubs we have decibel readers where it's very subjective noise, and I find in some places that benchmark helps assuage and gives credibility to our own enforcement. I'll just raise it as an opportunity for you to respond.
Absolutely, Councillor. As I said on my earlier point of reading, that the element of minimal disruption to any of our guests, the visitors, and ultimately local community, and through those engagements, subject to what was the previous condition of the planning application, is those regular community engagement meetings, that any opportunities could be discussed about the future elements, but also the complaints procedure that's available. So,
I mean, if I can say, I mean, you've been very eloquent. You're conscious of it and will be aware and will. Okay,
of course,
that's fine. Thanks for your help.
Right, and we're looking at Councillor Tony Lukey.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm glad you're accepting those suggested conditions from the neighbours there at West Chiswick and Gunnersbury. Whilst the litter and similar behaviour on your site is your business. It's although we do have enforcement powers as a local authority on private ground. The one other condition, or will people? Yeah, I mean, I understand football better than that minority sport that you host at the community stadium. But what I do know about that, being near Twickenham, there's a lot of these tailgate parties, tailgate drinking and eating at the back of cars before rugby games. I'd like that condition that there won't be any private parties on, out of car boots. People are going to come and park at Chiswick Park They come, they park, they leave, go to the match, and then they come back. You're talking about 3 hours, coming back 3 hours after. There's one that we're discussing very close to me. It's an hour and a half after. Why allowing such a long time? I understand. Probably your answer will be that they can use people can use the facilities locally, and that's good. That's good. But I just want that clarified. The times that they're allowed to park and leave. But particularly the other parties that you know, and the voices, no doubt, will travel, excitable rugby supporters. And that's about it, as long as you accept the others. And my friend, you didn't introduce you. I know you're Sally Stevens. I don't know who the other guys are because you didn't introduce yourselves. But oh, right, okay, because your names are really long. The chap from Chiswick Park, are you going to sort those trees out for the neighbours? You've heard it here today, but no doubt you've got liaison with the residents at Silver Crescent. That would be good to do it. Planting season is upon us.
Councillor, as operations director of the park, I'll take that comment and point raised. The way to look into that in further detail with the team.
Okay. What's your name again?
Gary.
Okay, Gary. All right. Cheers.
Okay. That looks like everybody's had enough questions.
The toilets.
Oh, yes, the toilets.
What's going to happen with those toilets? Are you going to put some toilets in? Because I note here. I note here that toilets are provided at the stadium, which is within walking distance of Chiswick Business Park. When you've had a few drinks there at the stadium and you're walking back, and when you get there, so you might either go to the toilet in the stadium, or you might go to the toilet en route. You know, so you know, up against a Honda or something by the Clayton Hotel, or when you get into the business park. Again, that is your business, and that is your location. But I think if residents have suggested, I mean, because a convenient place would be to go and have go and relieve yourself against trees. And they're on the boundary with our residents at Silver Crescent. How are you going to address that? And can you bring temporary toilets in on the business park, or access to your own toilets there? You know, because I understand that even EST staff won't have access to toilets, or is that wrong?
They do, from a welfare facility perspective, have access to the team. One of the buildings facilities in which to use. It is not proposed that we would permit portable toilets on the business park, and that's not something that we would look to consider. It goes back to the regime of how we manage the park from a good estate management perspective, and we feel that portaloos wouldn't be the right appropriate condition for toilets on a match day.
It is something that has been addressed in our regular meetings with ward councillors, with London Borough of Hounslow, and one suggestion was that maybe we could bring portaloos in and put them on the site of Brentford Fountain Leisure Centre as a kind of reminder as people walk that way. It's not been confirmed, but it's something that has been raised a couple of times. Certainly we wouldn't have any objection to contributing towards the cost of those, I don't think.
Yeah, I think it's fairly obvious that the discussions, I mean, this is, you know, we know this is going to be a problem just because of, and also the fact is that people who, you know, it's not going to be quick to get out of the car park when you're leaving, because obviously we've got the traffic systems, which is safety, fine, and we know that the queuing is going to be within the car. That's what's proposed, is that it's inside the business park, and you know, very aware of the fact that, you know, it could be, you know, it won't just be 5 minutes before they leave, so we have to consider that. So I think that's a really serious. I mean, I know people laugh about it, but it's not in that situation. It's certainly very upsetting for the residents. Obviously, it's not actually very nice on the you know, people who are going to the matches. You know, suddenly that, you know, where do you go? and whatever. So if provision is provided and very good signing, obviously, is essential. I think that's something that we would all say. Okay, Councillor, sorry, Vikram Gurul again.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Lukey's absolutely spot on about the toilets. I appreciate that we're saying this is a fluid discussion, but especially on important and full capacity match days like the Chelsea one, as a prime example, there's certainly a need for portable toilets. Otherwise, we're going to see the antisocial behaviour and the negative externalities that Councillor Lukey mentioned from the whole footpath from the Chiswick business park to the stadium, and we certainly do not want to see that. And we know news travels fast and pictures can be taken, and it wouldn't put the borough in the best light possible. So I really think as a committee, we should take a bit more of a firm stance on the toilets and the need for them. And the chair's absolutely right. If you're needing to go, it's certainly not a laughing matter, and getting in and out of those car parks will not be a quick matter. So I really think that we should push harder on that.
Right, any other questions for our applicants? Looks probably not. Okay, so thank you all very much. Just so everybody knows, it's Sally Stevens, which I think most of us are aware of, from Brentford FC, with Niti Raj also, and it's Gary Blackledge, so from Enjoy Work, which I think is a wonderful title, so that's great. So thank you very much indeed. Okay, okay, so we now move back to Sarah Scannell, and I'm looking around at councillors. Questions for the officer? Are there any? Councillor Tony Lukey.
It was one I forgot to ask the applicants, but what are we doing about what conditions or how is the council getting the club to address the whether it's this location, Chiswick Business Park, or any others that they come up with? And I know using Lionel Road School at the moment too, aren't you? Yeah, how are you going to address? How is the council going to address the litter and the debris from football supporters on the way to and from parking and the stadium? That happens. We see that, and I see that when I go football very regularly. Litter bins fall on route. How and then they spill out onto the street. How are we dealing with that, and what have you done about that as planners?
Thank you. Well, it's beyond planning. It's not just a planning matter. That the planning permission secured. They're called the LAMP process. It's prior to every match. You have to submit the club have to submit a plan of how they're going to deal with all sorts of matters, including that. And then we're part of a group at the moment that are looking at every match in these initial stages, how it's gone, where are the critical points that we need to look at, what are the critical issues. So, like as I said, toilets have come up in those discussions frequently, litter as well, and antisocial behaviour. So from those meetings, we've got Hounslow Highways doing patrols on those match days. They've kind of monitored that situation and put extra litter bins where they're needed, or extra patrols where they're needed, looking at the hotspots of the routes. And I suppose depending on where that process that's secured in the Section 106 will allow us, when the parking and new parking areas get approved and get identified, those will come into the mix, and those will be looked at, those routes will be looked at, and extra patrol and light given to those for antisocial behaviour, for litter, and for monitoring more generally.
I can't see any other questions from any councillors. Oh, I have. Right, Michael.
Sorry about the late hand. I just had a question about the conditions, both the parking one and the question about the having toilets. Would these be difficult to enforce, in your opinion? Or I just wanted your view on them. That'd be helpful. Thank you.
So, in relation to the conditions, what I would propose is that the condition 4 is amended, the car park management plan, just slightly to include that reference to the phasing of the car parking, so that it goes from the east to the north, then Silver Crescent boundary at the last, which is not a challenge. The statement, which I think the applicants have said that they will submit, we will put into the approved condition, the approved document. So that is kind of tied it in there. In terms of the management, so we're not here saying that we will be putting toilets into Chiswick Business Park. That's not part of the proposition here. What is agreed and what is part of this application is in the method statement and the documentation that supported the scheme, details of the management of that of the process and the methods against which the Chiswick Business Park and the car parking management agents will be held to account. So they are approved documents, so that they will be sound. I think the point on the toilets needs to be taken away as part of that LAMP process, as part of the original Section 106. It's not part of this application because it is effectively part of the original Brentford Football Club application. And I think there are mechanisms within here which the applicants have agreed to kind of look at those going forward. And that would include the reporting back to the West Chiswick and Gunnery Society about the kind of monitoring of how this parking is going. So I think that in summary, we will amend condition 4 just to update it with that phasing, and the other items will be contained within the approved documents.
Fine. Thanks, Sarah. That's very helpful.
Okay. Right. Councillor John Todd.
Can I suggest after what Sarah said that we recommend approval?
Thank you. Councillor Harleen Atwell-Hill, you're seconding that? Thank you. Okay. Well, we have approval on the table. All those in favour, can you please show? Thank you. Against? Abstentions? One abstention. Yeah, that's fine. Right, that's fine. Thank you very much indeed. So that has been approved. Okay, with those amendments and conditions. Thank you very much. Okay. Right, we have one other item on the agenda, which I'm going to crack into now. Item 5, former garage block and land in Bedfont. Okay. Okay, Sam?
Thank you very much, Chair. So as the Chair's just pointed out, the application concerns the former garage block and land to the rear of 17 to 39 Bethany Way, which is in Bedfont in Feltham. The application site comprises one of the council's own housing estates. You can see that outlined in blue, that's a wider estate, and the application site itself is the top northwestern corner, which is an area of former garage blocks and land to the rear of the block at 17 to 39. This is just showing an aerial image of the site. So you can see that originally it was laid out with garages and hard standing to provide access to those, as well as part of the garden area for the flats. And you can see in the surrounding area, there's a strong tree buffer on the northern and western part of the site. Beyond that lies the Longford River. To the west of the site, which is on the left of your screen, that is Dorchester Close. That is a cul-de-sac with a mixture of bungalows and other houses on there. And the Bethany Way estate, that is a mixture of 3-storey blocks of flats and 2-storey houses, some of which have been extended. And this is just showing some site photos here. The top one shows the flats, which you can see at 17 to 39 there on the far left, and the garages blocks that were there. They have now been demolished. You can see the houses, the 2-storey houses, which form part of the Bethany Way estate, and the bungalow there on Dorchester Drive. And at the bottom as well, that's just from the end of the cul-de-sac at Dorchester Drive. And this is another photo just of the access up to where the houses are proposed from within Bethany Way, and the block of flats again and the houses either side of that. And this is the former garage block, which has now been demolished. That is no longer there. The application site is used as like a site compound for the wider works to the Bethany Way estate, which are being undertaken at the moment. So the application proposes the erection of 4 houses, 4 terraced houses. There would be 3 2-bedroom houses and 1 3-bedroom house. These houses would be council owned, so they would be provided at social rent levels. Parking is also provided, as well as landscaping, including gardens to the rear of the proposed houses and a play area on part of the original garden space for Bethany Way. This is a CGI of the proposed houses. As you can see, it's a high-quality contemporary design. It's using features such as the brick to respond to the Bethany Way estate, but it is a modern design compared to some of the more surrounding areas, houses. But we do think that this fits well within the wider scheme and the context. And this is just showing some of the elevations. This would be the front elevation of the houses, and that's the side. And just important to note that there would be no windows on the side facing onto Dorchester Drive, so that's just going to protect those neighbours. Privacy, and talking of privacy, these are the overlooking distance, so members will be aware that we have that ballpark figure of 18 to 21 metres for overlooking. This complies with that comfortably, so we've got 21 metres to the closest block of flats and 28 metres to the houses in Bethany Way, so the development's compliant with regards to neighbour amenity in terms of privacy and light and outlook. Now, in terms of the planning considerations before you this evening, the development plan supports the development of small sites to provide housing in the borough, and particularly housing which is affordable at council rent levels, bearing in mind that the applicant is the council's housing department. So these are social rent houses. In terms of the consultations that we undertook, we wrote to 109 neighbours and we received 21 objections. The details are set out in the main body of the report. We also received an 85 signature petition in objection. The matters raised covered in the main consultation section. Since the publication of the addendum report, I also received 1 further written objection. The matters that have been raised in that are largely covered in the report, but just to draw your attention to 2 points that were not covered in the consultation section. That is to do with bats roosting adjacent to the Longford River, and also that this resident who's objected disagrees with the council's assessment that the area has poor public transport and instead considers that it's good public transport. But they're the main elements of the consultations that were undertaken, and they're set out in the report, and just as I've explained. So as I said, in terms of planning policy, we support development of small sites to deliver new housing in the borough. But obviously we have to weigh that against any conflicts with the development plan, because the proposed site would occupy part of the garden space as is set out in the report. That would conflict with the development plan, because the amount of garden space that would remain for the wider Bethany Way residents in terms of the communal gardens would fall below what we look for at planning policy level. However, members will need to balance that out alongside the provision of the new play area and also the provision of the council housing that is proposed. Members will need to weigh that up in their consideration of the application. In terms of the housing, as I've set out, it's acceptable in terms of its design and the impact on neighbours. Since the publication of the report, you'll note in the addendum report that the applicant has been able to improve the carbon emission reductions. So we're now looking at an average of around about 84% carbon reduction against building regulations, which is a highly sustainable scheme. And that's really good to see, and they've achieved that through the provision of solar panels and uprating the rating of them. So that's really important consideration. These are highly sustainable homes in a highly sustainable location. The quality of the accommodation for the proposed residents would comply with all of the relevant standards. And there's also no conflict with the development plan in terms of the parking, servicing and transport aspects. So overall, on balance, whilst there would be a conflict with the plan in terms of the amenity space, it is considered that the benefits of the scheme would outweigh that conflict. And it's recommended that planning permission be granted, subject to the conditions in the report and the addendum report. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Questions for the officer? I'm having a quick look round. Can't see anybody signalling. No questions for the officer. Okay, comments? Anything else anyone wants to do? Yes, Councillor Michael Dennis.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I did note the lack of the reduction in amenity space, and and the fact that at page sorry. On page 47, 6.31, and this is a negative aspect of the proposal. But I just want to say that I think balanced against the provision of these affordable houses, particularly and the sustainable development, local policy plan SC2 and SC1. I just feel that on the balance, I would lean on supporting this application. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Guy Lambert.
I had the same concern, actually. I mean, people are complaining it's overdevelopment, and we're going below the recognised levels of amenity space. Now, normally, planning officers will say, "Oh, yeah, but there's a huge park next to this, so that's all right then." But you're not saying that here. There isn't a huge park next to it. So why is it acceptable to lose that? So that to have amenity space below the policy levels.
So in terms of my recommendation, it's that the public benefits of the delivery of these sustainable social rent houses would outweigh the conflict of that plan policy requirement. I mean, obviously what you've got to look at the shortfall is that it's about quantity. And I suppose another way to think about the amenity space is that there's a quality aspect as well to that. And, you know, we are getting the play area there, which is shown on the plans that will be provided in part of that area. So at the moment, obviously with the garden spaces, it's informalised, but you're going to have that formalised play for younger residents delivered through this application. In addition, there are still existing communal gardens on the site. This is not resulting in the loss of all the communal gardens. There are other garden areas around the blocks that remain that could be used by the residents as well. But that's ultimately for members to weigh up in terms of their planning balance aspects of that. But my recommendation is that that conflict with the amenity space policy is outweighed by the public benefits.
Councillor Tony Lukey.
Well, if that's the case, as you describe, and you know, nobody's come back to say, "Oh, we need housing," you know, like they do every time without too much investigation in this. What is the applicant doing in order to enhance? No, exactly. People do that. They vote that way as well. What is the applicant doing to enhance these remaining amenity spaces around the blocks? Because I don't see anything there, and that's quite an open area, Bethany Way, almost onto the Staines Road. So what have you asked them to do apart from putting in a few logs that will rot?
So obviously we can only look at what's within the red line boundary, but you know, as members are aware, the council is the applicant here. So in terms of the council obviously doing a wider estate refresh programme, etc., I can't really speak too much for the applicant in that respect, but what members may wish to consider is that we can look to widen the scope of the landscaping condition to include the rest of the area in the blue line, because obviously that is under the applicant's control, and we can make sure that the landscaping is considered across the whole site if permission is granted as part of this application here.
Do that, please.
Yeah, that's fine. So any approval would be subject to the amendment to the landscaping condition as recommended by Councillor Lukey there.
Okay.
Sorry, Chair. And can this condition be shared with ward councillors, Bedford ward councillors, but also there'd be some discussion with residents who have raised this. There's a community consultation in terms of the landscape and what else should be there. Otherwise, you know, if they can't reach agreement on that condition, then it should come back to the committee. If you can minute that.
Okay, that's fine. So what we can do is if that landscaping condition is submitted to us for approval, we wouldn't normally consult on conditions, but we can look to undertake consultation given obviously the importance of this. So that's not a problem. Sorry, I'll clarify. There's no legal requirement for consultations or public consultation on conditions, but if members would like us to do that for this particular condition, we'll be happy to do that.
Okay, right, comments. Any extra comments? Anybody want to move something? Anybody? Yes, Councillor Guy Lambert.
Approval.
Okay, can I have a seconder? Oh, there's loads of you. Right, I've got, sorry, I think Councillor Vikram Guru's hand was quicker than anybody else's, but fractionally beating Ajma. Right, so approval's on the table. Can I see everyone in favour, please?
Could I have a point of order?
Sorry? Oh.
Do you mind if I raise a point of order?
You can raise a point of order.
Is this subject to condition?
Oh,
or
they're
not?
absolutely subject to
Fantastic.
condition.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Brilliant.
Sorry, I missed that bit. Thank you very much, Councillor Dennis. That's fine. Okay, so subject to conditions. Everyone in favour? I thought everyone showed there, didn't they? Could you just do it again for Wendy, please? Thank you. Excellent. Yes, that's approved by all. So thank you very much indeed for that. Okay, so just Councillor Tony Dookie.
Unless were you going to ask if there's any other business?
I am just about to move on to other planning matters. And
Okay,
if there's
sorry, yeah,
any
okay.
other business which the chair considers urgent, the point is that nobody's actually raised anything with me, but if you're about to raise something, would you like to do that as long as it's within?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I've been away for a while, you know. I've been
Well, we
away.
noticed, we missed you.
Yeah, obviously. But when previously there used to be a report at the end of each planning committee agenda saying where we are with community infrastructure levy and various other, and where we are with appeals and numbers one, numbers last, all that. Why haven't we had it lately? Who's decided not to have that? And can we forthwith, with the committee's agreement, get that back on the agenda for subsequent meetings, every meeting, please?
Councillor Sarah Scannell. Councillor yet. I'm sorry, I'm getting.
Yeah, I love that.
Oh, there we go. Sorry, I beg your pardon. No, I'm sorry. She's representing the London Borough of Hounslow. So sorry about that. Right, Sarah.
Yeah. So in absolute fairness, they fell out because we were having the 2 committees a month, so we couldn't do the monthly trawl. Definitely we'll get that back on for next committee. And as I was going to mention, what we also had on that report was what was coming forward at the next planning development presentation meeting. So to verbally update you, we will have one on the 23rd of September. It's in diaries. We have Griffin Park and Duffy being presented. Griffin Park and Duffy. So the Brentford Football Club last phase, residential phase. Duffy will be a reminder. That's an application that's already in ahead of it, heading to planning committee. And then Griffin Park is a pre-app at the moment. And another scheme which is just about to be confirmed. So you'll get the usual email, if not tomorrow or Monday, about those. I don't know. I've just been told it's waiting to be confirmed.
Mystery. Okay. So, and can I just remind you all that the date of the next meeting is the 14th of October, 2021. Okay, thank you. And thank you all very much for your attendance and your due diligence tonight. So thank you all. And thank you all for those people who are still managing to watch us. Good night.